Nepsli did not think he would ever wake again, and when he did, he found himself staring up at a young girl framed by a starry, nebulous sky. Nepsli blinked several times, trying to grasp what had occurred. The girl's face was round, a pleasant smile on her lips.
Nepsli?
She asked.
Nepsli Everlife?
Leaning forward, Nepsli groaned, his body sore. Yes, he said lowly, still trying to orient himself. He was in a coffin, several feet in the ground. The air smelled earthy, like freshly turned soil. He must have been buried and dug up again. The girl above him gave an elated laugh.
Vivila was right. It did work.
Nepsli felt a familiar weight around his neck and looked down. Resting against his chest was the necklace, his family heirloom. A symbol, as his father had said, of the Necro Revenant. It still twinkled with crimson light, and he gently touched it with his fingers. Suddenly he remembered where he had last been, the long plains to the west. He had been traversing them, nearing the elvish border, when he had met an elf who called himself Enyen. Even now, in his mind, Nepsli could see the wizened man, ancient and weathered with experience despite his eternally young face. He had held a gray staff decorated in carved runes, a look of calm justice chiseled into his features. Enyen had tracked Nepsli down for the crimes he had committed, the deaths he had caused, which had earned him the title the Monster of the West. At the time, Nepsli had laughed at him. Then, they had fought. The elf Enyen was without a doubt the most skilled fighter Nepsli had ever met. Although Nepsli had drawn upon the magics of the necklace, he had not been able to defeat the elf. As they fought, Enyen had spoken of redemption, of the sins Nepsli had committed and the regret he should feel. And oddly, in that man's compassionate voice, Nepsli did find himself fraught with regret. At long last, he had been defeated, not by the elf's magic or by his staff, but by his words. Nepsli had collapsed to his knees, the weight of his crimes at last coming to the surface, and he had cried there, like a child. He had been afraid then, terrified that the three gods would see him and destroy him for what he had done to mar the world. But Enyen had stepped forward, placing one gentle hand on Nepsli's shoulder and the other on the necklace swinging from his neck. "The world is full of second chances, Nepsli," he had said, the words burning into Nepsli's mind. "Here's yours." In a blinding flash, Nepsli had known no more. And now, here he was, sitting in the dirt, looking up at a vampire obviously much younger than he. "How long have I been buried?" Nepsli asked as he straightened, stunned. The girl reached out. Decorating one of her fingers was a silver ring, its band traced with intricate, swirling detail and inlaid with a glowing ruby. The ruby looked almost identical to the jewel in Nepsli's necklace. He took her hand, and with her vampiric strength, she lifted him from the hole in the coffin inside.
"You've been in there for about a year,"
she said.
"You must be exhausted."
Besides the soreness, Nepsli oddly felt very awake. "What is your name?" he asked the girl. She smiled at him. Her face was framed with short black hair combed back behind her ears. She was petite, hardly able to reach up to Nepsli's chest.
"Nicolania,"
she said with a girlish grin.
"Nicolania von Tier. We've been looking for you for a long time."
"We?" Nepsli asked. He glanced around him. They were in a dark cemetery riddled with hills. The iron gates that surrounded it were bent and mangled in odd directions. Towering trees leered over them, their dead branches reaching in every direction. What kind of desolate place had he been buried in? And how was he alive again? He felt Nicolania nudge his hand, and she nodded towards the outer gates. She had an admiration in her eyes as she looked at him, a naivete that Nepsli envied. But he allowed himself to follow her down the dirt path toward the dark exit of the cemetery. Guilt surged up and down inside him like the pain of a lethal wound, vanishing only briefly, unforgotten, then reminding him again that he was bleeding out.
"Vivila and the others will be so happy to see you,"
said Nicolania.
"We've been looking for ages, and to think that you were so close by."
Nepsli only listened to half of what Nicolania was saying. She bounced on her heels as they moved down a dark, cobbled path into the night, leaving the tall, dead trees behind. Leaves scattered across the ground. In the distance lay hills, mountains, and a massive forest of pine trees. The road ahead was lit with the faint, bloody light of the necklace and the girl's ring. Nepsley's stomach turned like it had in the battle with Enyon. That guilty feeling was relentless. The things he had done with this necklace made him want to throw it away into the dark to be forgotten. 𝐞𝐞 was chattering about her domicile of vampires. The Black Hills Domicile, she called it, and its leader, who had been interested in finding the legendary Nepsley.
They say you were fierce, the monster of the West.
𝐞𝐞 said, bouncing as she walked. She talked about Nepsley like he was some kind of celebrity, and that same fondness in her eyes that Nepsley had seen earlier grew brighter. I was something like that, Nepsley muttered. As they made their way up another hill, his traveling companion became quiet. His dark reply had silenced her like a censure against a child. As they walked together, Nepsley could not get the words of Enyon the elf from his mind. Was this his second chance? They crested the hill, and Nepsley took a shaky breath. If he was indeed being given a second chance, he would take it, no matter the cost.
There it is.
𝐞𝐞 pointed at a light in the distance.
That's our domicile.
Nepsley followed her gaze. Atop a neighboring hill was a large mansion surrounded by dark woods, its towers topped with metal spires. The mansion's tall windows glowed yellow and flickered with candlelight, stretching from the bottom floor all the way up to the balconies dotting the top. 𝐞𝐞's eagerness had returned as she looked up at Nepsley with shining eyes.
Come, I will show you.
She took him by the hand, walking him down one hill and back up the next until they stood before the fire-glow-lit building. As they walked, Nepsley tried to keep his mind on the present. With the memories of Enyon as fresh as if they had happened a few hours ago, he couldn't help but feel that he was in some kind of strange fever dream. Once they reached the grounds of the domicile, 𝐞𝐞 practically skipping, Nepsley could see that the grounds were well taken care of. Intricate fountains gushed water, the reposed marble figures lounging in clumps and holding bowls in their hands. Nearby bushes and trees had been cut with precision into a well-manicured garden that wrapped around the perimeter of the building. The surrounding area was nothing but forest and mountains, but the sky above was clear, black, and filled with a scattering of glittering stars. The huge double doors to the building were made of polished chestnut wood. Gothic designs of angelic figures were carved into its surface, swords drawn, eyes blank and staring out at the two approaching vampires.
Don't worry,
𝐞𝐞 said.
the others will love you, I am sure.
She placed her hands on the doors. Wait. Nepsley reached out to try and stop her. Now that he stood on the doorstep, the prospect of facing strangers who knew him for what he was, filled him with panic. But it was too late. She pushed the doors open, and they slid inward without making a sound. 𝐞𝐞 again took his hand and brought him inside. Within was a marble gallery, gray and white. The entryway was small, but ornate, twisting pillars holding up an open second floor with a wooden railing. The centerpiece of the room was a grand staircase carpeted with red satin. Doors and banisters were made of the same deep chestnut wood as the entrance, all carved with intricate twisting detail. The walls were decorated with old paintings in tarnished gold frames, and vases filled with red roses littered the corners. The entire place was lit with the flickering of large candles placed on tables, walls, and banisters. Nepsley immediately realized that they weren't alone in the entryway. On either side of the staircase stood several figures, a welcoming committee of some kind. To Nepsley's left was a woman in a long purple dress, her hair done up behind her and her nails filed to wicked points. Standing beside her was a shorter vampire with messy hair and a solemn, soft face. He was covered in dirt. He must have been in the garden. To his right was another woman, tall and slender, wearing a black gown and a crimson corset. Her companion was a strange-looking vampire, a broad-shouldered man with a blindfold tied over his eyes. A warrior, Nepsley guessed, based on his build and rigid stature.
Did I not tell you that she would find him?
The woman in the purple dress simpered, picking at her pointed nails. She was not addressing any of the vampires at the bottom of the stairs. Instead, her face was turned upward to the crest of those steps. Nepsley's eyes followed hers. At the top of the staircase was a tall, slim figure. Nepsley was unsure if he had ever seen someone so regal. But it was not the same kind of peaceful, calm, confident regality with which Enyon had carried himself. The figure was pale, with long blonde hair combed in perfect waves around his shoulders. His eyes blazed with red light, even brighter than the gazes of the others in the room. He wore a shirt covered in ruffles, and its deep neckline showed off the white skin of his chest. Around his shoulders was a long, red, silky cloak, worn so casually it almost seemed to function more as a blanket. This man carried himself with a nobility that reminded Nepsley of the Vampire Council. Haughty, high-minded, self-absorbed. The old Nepsley would have fit in well with this vampire, but the new Nepsley found himself flinching away. The vampire at the head of the stairs smiled down at him. "Welcome," he said, his voice icy. He reached both his arms out as if he was encouraging the entire domicile to wrap itself around Nepsley in an embrace. "Nepsley Everlife, how long we have waited for you." As the vampire walked down the steps, Nepsley bowed his head slightly, uncertain what else to do. But he kept his eyes on the approaching figure. The pale-haired vampire smiled again, but Nepsley felt cold air between them. "I see you have already met our young Nicholania," the vampire said, reaching Nepsley and tossing Nicholania's hair with his long hand. His nails were cut to sharp points. Nicholania gave him a snarl, but her eyes smiled up at the vampire, a laugh just behind those bared teeth. "This is Giselle," the vampire said, pointing to the woman in the purple dress. "Beside her is 𝐓𝐴𝐴𝐴, our resident gardener." He then gestured to the other two. "This is Skyfire from the North Reaches, and the one with the blindfold is Dragon Wings." "Strange names," Nepsley finally got out. He felt panic the moment the words slipped past his lips. That had been offensive, but the vampire just laughed. "Indeed they are, Nepsley. You see, after a series of conquests, some of us have chosen to abandon our old names and adopt something new. Something that fits the feats we have accomplished." He swung himself around, the red silk of his long, flowing cloak billowing around him and draping off his thin frame. "As for me, you may call me Vavila Valentine." Vavila bowed low, his long, slender nose pointed to the marble ground. Then he straightened, that same wicked smile on his face. "This is my domicile. This is my family." He gestured around. "Do say hello, everyone. No need to be so quiet." The others greeted Nepsley with smiles and hellos. Nepsley bowed to each in turn. He was perceptive, though, and he could feel Vavila's eyes on him. No, on the necklace swinging from his neck as he moved. "I do hope that you will see them as your family, too," Vavila said. Nepsley felt his insides lurch, and he turned to Vavila. The vampire was still watching him, his red eyes somehow managing to look cold. "What is your game?" Nepsley wondered.
You can stay in the room next to mine. It's vacant,"
Nicholania said eagerly. The others were now chatting among themselves, no longer so formal. They had broken up from their stations by the stairs. Vavila must have set them up before Nepsley's arrival. There has been a misunderstanding," Nepsley said. "Forgive me, I did just wake up in a coffin after what I have been told was at least a year of unconsciousness. I agreed to come here with Nicholania, but I didn't express intent to stay." The entire group went silent from their chatter. Their eyes were on him again. "What did I tell you?" 𝐓𝐴𝐴𝐴 whispered to Giselle.
"This was too important a task for such a young vampire,"
Skyfire added. Dragon Wings, who had not yet moved from his spot, said nothing. His unseeing eyes were still staring in Nepsley's direction. Nepsley found it unnerving. Vavila frowned. "Did Nicholania not tell you anything?" he said, turning to her. She looked away, avoiding his eyes. Nepsley could see a sharpness in Vavila's gaze that he did not like. The blunt verbal blade he had used on her before had been exchanged for one with sharp edges, and his eyes were flashing. Then Vavila looked back at Nepsley and smiled. Your confusion is understandable. You will not be required to stay here by any means. But before you go, may I speak with you in private? Nepsley did not like the idea of being in a room alone with this strange vampire, this overly regal, self-touting, arrogant man. But this was his second chance. Perhaps he should investigate this place before moving on. He nodded to Vavila, and with a beckoning wave of the vampire's pale hand, they moved up the stairs together. They passed the second floor, climbing around the banister to a third floor. Nepsley glanced down at the others who were watching them from below. As soon as they noticed his gaze, they broke ranks and hurried off to what Nepsley could only assume were their separate duties. The third floor had a long, narrow hallway, and then, at the end, a door. Vavila moved through the hall like a ghost, his red silk cloak hissing against the ground. With a click, he opened the door and motioned Nepsley to enter first. Inside was a circular room, the walls more window than wood. Nepsley couldn't help but feel as if he were in a large glass bowl, like a fish being gazed in on by the world. Outside, he could see the mountains and the black forests. In the corner of the room was an immaculately made bed. An organized desk sat in the center of the room with stacked books and lit candles. The floors and walls were scrubbed clean, and the pictures in the frames, painted with vivid oils, depicted noble-looking vampires from years ago. Vavila shut the door behind them with a soft click. Nepsley turned to face him. "Extraordinary," Vavila whispered, his eyes on Nepsley. They traced down to the necklace, and his smile grew wider. "I have waited for this day for so long. It is an honor, Nepsley Everlife, to be here with you."
"There is no honor that can be eked out from me,"
Nepsley replied quickly.
"Vavila, I'm afraid that if you hoped I would join this group of vampires because you heard of my exploits before, then you will be disappointed. I'm not that man anymore."
Vavila watched and listened quietly. His smile flickered, but only for a moment. "I can understand what a confusing thing this must be," Vavila said. He stepped towards the desk at the center of the room, passing Nepsley. The red silk of Vavila's cloak touched Nepsley's fingers for just a moment. The folds of cloth were freezing cold. Vavila reached out and stroked the leather covers of one of the books on his desk. The book looked so old that Nepsley could almost feel the yellowing pages crumpling to powder in his hands. "You were sealed by elf magics," Vavila continued. "A sealing spell is extraordinarily advanced magic. It renders you unconscious, induces a comatose state, if you will, for as long as the caster wishes. There was only one thing that could break the spell and bring you back to us without the caster's consent." He turned and gestured with one of his pointed nails at the medallion around Nepsley's neck. "We collected that and returned it to you, knowing that having it around your neck once more would nullify the magic of that elf." Nepsley looked down at the glowing red jewel at the center of the necklace and touched the edges of it with his fingers. So, Enyon had taken the necklace from him in order to seal him away.
"How did you find it?"
Nepsley asked. "It was given to me," Vavila said, "by Enyon himself." Nepsley narrowed his eyes. Was Vavila lying to him? He couldn't tell. Perhaps the necklace could give him the ability to discern the truth. It had given him much in the past. As far as Nepsley was concerned, this relic had no limits. He tapped into it, hoping to find a way to pull out from it the ability to read minds. He felt the strength within the necklace and tugged. The power came to him easily, but the second he aimed it at Vavila, it seemed to fuzz and die. Vavila smiled. Then he lifted his arm and drew back the red silk. Attached to his wrist was a silvery bracelet decorated in red jewels. "You are not the only one with a powerful relic," Vavila said. "And that is why you are here." He pointed again at the necklace, and then at his own bracelet, tapping it affectionately. "Do you know what your necklace is, Nepsley?"
"A family heirloom,"
Nepsley said.
"A symbol of the Necro-Revenant. Whatever that is."
"And so much more. Favila said, grinning. Did you perhaps notice the ring on dear Nicolainia's finger? Nepsli nodded. He remembered the red gem in her ring that had looked similar not just to his necklace, but also to the bracelet around Favila's wrist. Favila snatched up a particularly old book at the top of the stack, opening it, and revealing the aged pages to Nepsli. Nepsli drew closer to get a better look. Inside the dusty book were images of those same 3 items, drawn next to some kind of looping, beautiful ancient language that Nepsli could not identify. Those relics are the symbols of the Necro-Revenant, yes, Favila said, but they are also gifts from the 3 gods bestowed upon the blood origins. Nepsli had not heard that term before. Judging by Favila's smile, he could tell. The original 3 vampires created from elves, Favila explained. The original vampires. That sounded more familiar. Favila closed the book with a snap and placed it back on the table, spreading his arms wide and letting the red silk drape down onto the stone floor. His figure was framed by the dark silhouette of the mountains outside. I am a descendant of Yareth the Bloodless. You of Vathrian the Gallant. Favila chuckled to himself as he stepped closer to Nepsli. And believe it or not, my friend, young Nicolania is the descendant of Lelia the Poised. Nepsli had never heard these names. Not once. He had, of course, heard many times that he was a living descendant of an original vampire, but the name had always eluded him. He had not been as invested as Favila clearly was.
You seem interested in history,
Nepsli noted. Indeed, Favila replied with a murmur and turned away. We 3 are the last living descendants of the original vampires. We own their relics. Do you not think much good can be done if we stick together? The words made Nepsli pause. Enion had wanted him to try again. Nepsli would give anything to undo some of what he had done, if it meant alleviating the crushing, quiet guilt that he felt.
Perhaps there is some good that could be done,
he agreed. Favila turned, a smile on his face. Then welcome, Nepsli Everlife, to your new home.